Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning still, I guess I should say. Thanks for joining us here in the 1836 studios. Really great to be with you talking about an issue that near and dear to my heart and certainly near and dear to the hearts of all patriots, the idea of whether or not we are allowed to defend ourselves and not, I know a lot of folks talk about the Second Amendment in terms of hunting and all those other fun activities, but our founding fathers had a very different view of why the citizenry was supposed to be able to keep and bear arms, and had nothing to do with having fresh venison for dinner, and everything to do with making sure that I, as a sovereign citizen of the United States of America, am able to defend myself not only against evildoers, but against evil-doing governments. To stop tyrants, ultimately. And yet, in the rush to do something, we are hearing otherwise right-thinking, conservative Republicans talking about doing something that erodes those rights further and further and further. So to talk about these issues, talk about what is and isn't the right thing to pursue when it comes to public safety and gun violence. Real excited to be joined today with three of the best folks in the Lone Star State on Second Amendment and constitutional issues. I'm going to start right next to me is the very lovely Rachel Malone of Gun Owners of America. Gun Owners of America, long-standing organization that has had a presence in Texas and around the country for a long time, focusing on the rights of gun owners, as the name kind of tends to imply. So Rachel Malone, thank you so much for being with us. Next to Rachel is former State Representative, don't want to accuse you of anything here, former State Representative Matt Rinaldi from the Metroplex, one of the clearest voices in the legislature and outside the legislature on constitutional rights. It's great to have Mr. Rinaldi here with us. Also an attorney, which actually you don't like it when people call you that, do you? I keep forgetting. I'm calling him all these bad names today. And then there at the end, far left for me, for all of you on the far right, I guess. But either way is my friend Chris McNutt of Texas Gun Rights, part of National Association of Gun Rights. Chris, of course, is the fellow who the entire state wagged their collective fingers at earlier this year when Texas House Speaker Dennis Bonnen came out and said that Chris had threatened his family and all these other things, complete lies. And thanks to the nice folks at the Texas Department of Public Safety for having not deleted their camcorder records, completely disproved. And so Chris McNutt, always the cheerful warrior, just kept on promoting the Second Amendment. And so Chris, thanks for being with us, and thanks for standing up to the bully in the speaker's chair. Really appreciate you. All right, so let's jump into this, guys. As we go through our time, I want to ask each of you to plug your web addresses and that kind of thing so that folks can sign up. And for all of you at home, if you've got questions or comments for these guys throughout our time together, please throw those on there. And also just let us know you're watching so we can say hello during our time here. But I want to start, though, with this idea that's become rather pervasive, the idea of universal background checks for purchasing firearms. What's wrong? All right, I'm going to set aside my own natural hatred of all things dealing with the federal government. But what's wrong with the idea, Rachel, of a universal background check system when someone is purchasing a potentially dangerous item?
Right. So first of all, universal background checks is a name meaning that the government will say, even if you sell a gun privately, not through an FFL, you're just selling a gun to your friend or to somebody else privately, you have to go get a background check. The main problem with that is it's expecting that criminals are going to follow the law. It's expecting that we can set a law and say, okay, make this the law, everybody will now go get a background check, and therefore criminals will be stopped from purchasing guns. And we know that's a complete lie.
All right. Matt, do you agree?
Yeah, I do, and that's the reason why it doesn't help the problem that they're trying to solve, and the way it hurts people is, number one, it increases the cost of owning a gun. It's effectively a tax on a gun because it makes it harder to sell that gun. Two, and perhaps most important, is it effectively creates a gun registry. What you have to do when you're a firearms dealer, you have to fill out a form called Form 4473. You fill it out. It has all of your identifying information. It has the serial number of the weapon. And you have to keep that form on file for 20 years. And if you go out of business, you have to give it to the ATF. So effectively, one ATF rule away, one congressional enactment away, a subpoena away, is a gun registry. The reason why we don't have one now is because you only have records of about 80 to 85% of the sales, which are done through an FFL. It's not enough to create a registry that's effective for gun confiscation, but you're closing that 15%. So you would actually have a complete record of all purchases if you apply it to private sales.
All right. So when we talk about gun confiscation, okay, there's the C word, confiscation. We've had Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis O'Rourke, former congressman from El Paso. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15s. Which what I think he actually meant was, hell yes, we're going to take everything with a trigger that might be in your home. Why should law-abiding citizens fear, government agencies confiscating their firearms?
Well, you simply just need to look at history. Over the course of history, there's been multiple instances where governments, tyrannical governments, start off by, taking back, confiscating the weapons of their citizenry. And you can look as recently as what's gone on in Venezuela and everything that's gone down there. That's because they confiscated the firearms of their citizens and they had no way to fight back. So with piggybacking off of what Representative Rinaldi said regarding the NICS registry being a registry, 94% of the denials that the NICS kicks back are false positives, which means that 94% of the people who are denied are wrongly denied. They're law-abiding citizens who simply had the same name or a similar name to a criminal elsewhere. And trying to expand upon that by adding millions more names, it's just a recipe for even bigger disaster.
And I want to add to that, that's actually racially discriminatory. Because Hispanics are more likely to have the same names as, or names similar to other Hispanics, and African Americans to other African Americans. They are more likely to get wrongly denied from purchasing a gun just because their name happens to be the similar spelling or phonetically similar to somebody else who actually should have been denied.
By the way, in case you doubt that, the purpose of these record-keeping requirements in the NICS registry is to form a gun registry. If you complete a gun sale, you have to keep the form on file for 20 years. If you're rejected for any reason, you only have to keep it on file for 5. So they only want to know if you have the gun or have purchased a gun.
Right.
They don't care if you're a criminal and tried to get one and you got rejected.
All right, so we had a question from Stacy. Stacy Roberts, who noted this concern that it seems like a lot of these discussions about gun control, the question about gun control, is really a push for group control, for people control. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, the far left, they just want to take our guns. And that's why it's sad to see that Republicans like Dan Patrick, like Governor Abbott, are starting to cave on this issue and capitulate to the left because of that do something mentality that you mentioned earlier. And it's not going to do anything to stop the gun violence or help the re-election chances.
Okay, so now let's talk. For the moment, let's give the devil his due and say that yes, we need this background check system, universal background check. How does that then be enforced? How do you enforce? How do you reasonably enforce it? Kind of in your lawyer and legislator mind. How do you start enforcing that kind of system? We're talking about every gun sale, everyone with a gun, everyone who wants a gun. That seems like a lot of government suddenly.
Yeah, it is. You'd have to have a complete record of purchases in order to truly enforce it, which is why people say you need to create a gun registry in order to enforce it. They say they're not going to, so it's not really enforceable the way if you don't have one. Then you have the other problem that it already creates a gun registry out of the existing documentation. So I don't see it as enforceable.
So like some of these other proposals, the idea of a universal background check system is really little more than a let's stop the law-abiding, make it harder for law-abiding citizens to have a gun. Because let's face it, if the law passed tomorrow, saying universal background check, the four of us and everyone watching this as good law-abiding citizens says, well, I disagree with that. I'm going to vote for people to change that law, and I'm going to petition. I'm going to write letters, but gosh, I'm going to go follow the law. And so, the gun I want to buy this weekend, well, I guess I've got to do go through all the hassle, right? The bad guy isn't thinking about that at all. The bad guy, he's already planning on killing someone. He's probably not too worried about did he fill out the pink form, at the, in the, outside the back of the El Camino that he's buying the gun from in the back alley.
It's great you say that, because the majority of firearms that are used in crimes are illegally gotten. They were not, purchased at a store, or, they weren't purchased legally, and putting this registry in place is not going to do anything to prevent that. In Canada, they have registration, for an example, and they came to find out that only 4.7% of the firearms that were used by criminals were actually registered to the criminal. So that means 96% of the other instances, they either don't know or they were stolen.
All right, I want to quickly say hello to Tiffany from Deer Park. Great to have Tiffany on with us. Also Steph. I'm also from Deer Park. Dave is watching Carrollton, and Carrie Cheshire joins us from Hockley, Texas. Great to have all of you with us. Also watching here through the magic of the internet is our very own Brandon Waltons on his honeymoon in the UK. That's how much he cares about liberty. He has told his new bride, you go sightsee, and I'm going to watch
or they're
Chris.
watching together.
Or maybe they're watching together. Maybe so. Either way, but really appreciate Brandon taking some time to watch us today. So, all right, we're talking about universal background checks. Now, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas came out and said, well, let's just do stranger to stranger sales, and. I think each of us have publicly talked about this concern of, what does that mean? It occurs to me that maybe the only people who are able to really sell firearms to the straight face are going to be the Quakers, as the Society of Friends. Everyone's a friend to a Quaker. As a Presbyterian, I'm suspicious of all of you people, so I can't sell a gun to anyone.
Have to convert.
Yeah, I may have to convert to Quakerism or something. But so what? When you look at Dan Patrick's policy, the idea of the stranger to stranger private sales suddenly being regulated, what kind of red flags does that shoot up for you, Rachel?
A lot.
Red flags. Something else we'll talk about in a minute. So
right,
hold on.
yes, we'll get to the red flags. Everybody wants to know about that. So like you mentioned, first of all, even if you don't care about the freedom issues, who's a stranger? Is it somebody that I've known for at least 3 months? Is it somebody that I don't know their name, but I've been shooting with them at a course for the whole entire week and I've seen them? Is it, what if it's a friend of a very trusted friend, but hey, I haven't ever met them, so I have to, what if we're at the range and I want to hand them my gun, to shoot it, that actually counts as a transfer.
Right.
So logistically, it's terrible. But even so, it raises exactly the same dangers and warnings as we mentioned for any type of universal background checks. People can already go and get a background check for any private gun sale if they want to. They can go to an FFL and get that checked. They can refuse to sell to anybody. They can do that. We don't need a law that says they have to, because that there's no way that can be enforced. And something I want to stress is a lot of these folks, like Patrick and Abbott and others we'll talk about, are trying to say, we just want to be reasonable. We're not trying to take away your guns. Let's look at history just really quickly. 2 other times, the government wasn't coming to take away the guns. You look at Lexington Green. Why did everything go down early morning, April 17th, 1775? The redcoats weren't marched to take away the town's guns. They were only going to take away the gunpowder. But the men on Lexington Green said, no, that's not enough, and they drew their line in the sand. Same for the Alamo. Mexican government wanted to take away the cannon from the Texans. They weren't taking away their knives and their other things. It was just those cannon, right? And they drew their line in the sand there. And so I think we need to think through this and make sure we're drawing our own line in the sand well before it comes to them doing what we think of as banning all of the guns. The line in the sand comes well before that.
Matt, when you talk about this idea, how would you define a stranger legislatively?
I don't think you can define what a friend is in code or a stranger is in code in a way that wouldn't be
How many
unconstitutionally
Facebook
vague.
memes have we shared back and forth, maybe? Does that count?
I mean, you can't possibly do it, so I think that's just a public relations definition designed to make his very bad proposal sound better. But when you look at it, if they actually do try to define it, I don't know if you can do it in a way that passes constitutional muster. So I mean, you're also in danger of that definition being struck down and you being stuck with, again, it being applied to everybody.
All right. So, Chris, as you think about this idea of prohibiting stranger-to-stranger gun sales, it feels like the real effect of that is to just end the ability of private individuals to dispose of or collect private property without a third party. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Representative Matt Schaefer out in East Texas said it best. It's opposing Texan to Texan sales. And it's just making the assumption that Texans are somehow inherently bad and they can't be trusted. And I think that's a very dangerous precedent to set in our society.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think would happen to the value of your car if you have a gun collection or something? What would happen to the value of your car if you said you couldn't sell it privately? You had to sell it through a car dealer,
right,
or trade it in. It would go. I mean, it would go down. I mean, you're taking people's personal property.
Well, there's a part of me that wonders, and of course we're all evil right wingers, and we're not supposed to think about poor people. But it feels like that what this has, in some ways, an effect of doing, of making it more expensive to own a firearm and to purchase a firearm. That while again, the whole mythical, if tomorrow the law passed, okay, it's going to increase the cost and make it a little more difficult for me to go get a gun, but I can do that. I can afford that. I'm blessed with a nice salary and a very patient wife, all those kind of things. That I may not want to part with the extra cash if I can, but yet just 10 more bucks, 20 more bucks, 50 more bucks, 100 more bucks. Suddenly that does make it more expensive.
And
buying a used gun from a friend, if that's no longer an option, there are some people now be priced out of owning a gun.
And it's not just cash. Even if $25, you can say, okay, that shouldn't be a big deal. It is for some people. But even if it isn't, I had a friend in West Texas respond to Lieutenant Governor Patrick. He had said, it's just a quick trip to the gun store. And he said, yeah, that quick trip to the gun store, it's 65 miles one way for me. And so I'm assuming maybe Lieutenant Governor doesn't understand the state and understand West Texas because that's what it looks like for them.
Plus, you got to find a gun dealer that's willing to do it. I mean, when you buy off the internet, it's very difficult to find somebody who wants to do a background check for a sale that they're not involved in and getting the profit from. So it costs. I mean, it could cost $45, and if you're increasing the demand,
unless you're going to
let it go higher.
require,
well, yeah, then the demand goes up. And
now you're going to
goes
mandate that they participate, which again is government interference in private business.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point that it just creates another barrier to entry to lower income folks. And states like Massachusetts actually, it was a slew of things, but after they implemented gun registration and also expensive license to carry fees, their gun ownership rate dropped from 1.5 million down to only 200,000 in a matter of I want to say it was about 10 years. So at the end of the day, I mean, this is discouraging law-abiding citizens from being able to protect themselves and their loved ones.
And what's the cost, right? I mean, there is a human life cost to that because we've seen gun ownership almost double in the past 30 years while murder rates have been cut in half.
Well, it was very striking to me while the entire world is being focused on, we need to start grabbing guns and registries and other things. You had a young African-American lady be able to save her own life because she had a firearm at at the ready.
Shout out to Lachelle Hudgens. I think those are the names we should be talking about.
Right. But we don't want to talk about her. No. I mean, and it feels like the left is, and the left and the right, people legend on the right, are more than happy for ladies like that to be victimized, to be stolen from, raped, killed, whatever it might be, in the name of some elusive safety. Well, that doesn't sound very safe to me.
Lachelle was in her car. She just parked in her driveway or in her apartment complex. She was in her car. There were 5 men who came to attack her. Those odds are not good at all. 2 of them were reaching inside of her car. And that one young woman was able to use a gun to defend herself.
Right. The reason we have a Second Amendment, by the way. So, all right. So, Mr. Rinaldi, you dug up something that I thought was rather humorous, and that is that, of course, this idea of banning stranger-to-stranger private sales is not new. The left has been trying to do it for a while. Barack Obama wanted to do it. And Governor Greg Abbott had up on his website a petition urging people to sign a petition to stop these onerous regulations. And it seems very strange that the governor and the lieutenant governor and Obama, where does all how do these guys reconcile that, do you think?
I don't think you can, and I didn't dig it up. I got it from Byron, who might be watching now. But yeah, Greg Abbott had on his website opposition to Obama's 2015 gun control executive orders, which extended background checks only to people in the business of selling firearms and certain trusts.
So arguably not as bad as what?
No, not even arguably.
Yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
not as broad as what's being proposed right now.
Funny. All right, I want to shift gears real quick. And first, Chris McNutt, how can folks learn more about Texas gun rights? Where on the interwebs can they go to find you guys?
Sure. So our website is txgr.org, and you can also find us on Facebook at TX Gun Rights.
Excellent, fantastic. And Gun Owners of America, Rachel, where can they find you
Yes,
guys?
so you can go online to gunowners.org, or you can follow me on Facebook for live updates from a lot of events and what's happening here in Texas. That's Rachel Malone on Facebook.
All right, and Matt Rinaldi, a reformed member of the criminal class known as an elected official, they can still find out what you're doing both on social media and also mattrinaldi.com. Is that right?
Well, not mattrinaldi.com, Facebook, Matt Rinaldi TX,
Okay,
or on
great.
Twitter, Matt Rinaldi TX.
Fantastic. All right, fantastic. Okay, so I want to talk now about red flag laws. All right, so on the one hand, you put on your very reasonable watch, meet the press, that kind of hat on for a second, and all these things. Oh yes, if there's a deranged person out there, we need to raise a red flag on their ability to do something. What's wrong with red flag laws, Chris?
I mean, there's already enough laws on the books that can handle these situations. I mean, through people that make terroristic threats. And, as we saw in the Parkland situation last year, law enforcement visited that gentleman's house dozens of times, yet he was still out in the public able to, commit the atrocities that he did. And so there are other things that can be done to handle those before it turns into these violent situations.
All right, so we've got a question here from Carrie Cheshire, not an employee of Empower Texans, but Carrie Cheshire, an activist up in East Texas, who asked, would any of the proposed gun control laws proposed out there prevent the shootings in El Paso or Odessa? Would any of these laws have stopped those?
Well, so even Lieutenant Governor Patrick himself has said that after each of these recent shootings, it's something else. So they're always being reactionary, trying to chase these different proposals. At the end of the day, they wouldn't have stopped anything. The red flag laws would not have stopped what just happened. The private sales in Midland, Odessa, it came out that the guy purchased an illegally manufactured firearm. So how is banning private sales going to stop something like that?
And he was required to do a background check under the Obama 2015 executive order because he was apparently in the business of selling firearms.
Yeah, so a guy selling an illegally manufactured firearm to someone who shouldn't have been able to buy one, but yet another law is going to fix that.
And didn't follow the background check law that exists.
Okay. All right. So, one concern a number of folks raise, Mr. Rinaldi, and maybe you can shed some light on this for us, is the idea of due process rights. That on the one hand, if I say, oh my gosh, that Chris McNutt, you can tell the glimmer in his eyes. There's something wrong with him.
Got a scary lapel pin.
You got a scary lapel pin on there or something. So I'm going to raise the metaphorical red flag. That would seem to indicate then under these laws that the police go, open his door, take his guns, and he's gone. What about his rights? Well, wait a second, Sullivan's lying about me. Sullivan's made up this crazy story about me. How do red flag laws comport with our due process rights?
I don't think they do. The way they're applied in many jurisdictions, you don't even have an opportunity to defend yourself. Somebody can go in and get like a temporary restraining order effectively, and then all of a sudden you have police knocking down your door. Even if Abbott and Patrick would
And what if they're
deal
knocking
with
down the
that.
wrong door suddenly?
Right.
Yeah, a whole nother issue.
That never happened.
But
yeah, that never happened. Yeah.
Even if they addressed that issue and allowed you an opportunity to defend themselves, number one, it doesn't work because they had red flags with the shooter in Odessa, for example, who called the police and they didn't even act on it. Secondly, there are due process problems with suddenly starting to focus your crime prevention efforts on predicting who will commit a crime based on behavioral
I think
factors.
Tom Cruise did a movie about that and it didn't work out
the
so well for anyone.
Minority
Yeah,
Report.
Yeah.
No, and then when you think about it, also look, when Briscoe Kane said, "Come and take it" to Beto O'Rourke, suddenly people are wanting to turn him in and say that all his guns should be taken away. This will be a punitive measure
Now,
against
maybe his should be.
conservatives.
I mean, not
Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
No, I mean it's punitively. These measures are punitively used against conservatives who, increasingly, the left is trying to categorize conservatism as a mental disorder.
You know, and that's the scary thing, that these social media companies are starting to be brought to the table, you know, to monitor social media posts and things like that. I mean, that could have tremendous negative ramifications for red flag laws and a whole slew of other civil liberty issues.
Yeah, what if everybody who got banned from Facebook for what is called threatening conduct then had a visit from the police to take their guns?
Yeah. So here's the deal with red flag laws. Let's just break it down. Every state's red flag law is a little bit different. The details are different, but essentially it means it makes it easier for the government to take away your gun, specifically before a crime is committed.
Right.
So we're not prosecuting for a crime. We're saying take it away before the crime has been committed. There are two parts of it, okay? So there are two cans of poison. One can of poison is substantive. It says, let's lower the threshold for taking away your constitutional right. You don't have to be prosecuted and convicted of a heinous, violent crime. We just have to think you're going to do it. The other can of poison is your procedural due process, which a lot of red flag laws say, you know, it's ex parte, which means you don't even know this is happening. You don't know they're making this decision. You don't get a chance to defend yourself. And we've heard some cries, including from Governor Abbott, saying, you know what, we're going to have red flag laws with due process. And what they mean is we're going to keep one can of poison and we're going to take away the other can. So we're going to keep that threshold low, but we're going to tell you what's happening. You can come and defend yourself. We'll even, you know, taxpayers will provide you an attorney. You still have that other can of poison. You can't get around that.
So, you know, again, I'm gonna sound like a little bit like a broken record here, but you know, it's one thing for Matt Rinaldi, a successful attorney who is an attorney and all these kind of things, who can, you know, understand the process, defend himself. When Sullivan and McNutt make a fallacious, you know, raise a fallacious red flag against Rinaldi, he can defend himself more often than not. You know, a lot of people don't understand the system, and it's nice to make these claims. Oh, well, some taxpayer-funded lawyer will help you. I mean, yeah, ask a lot of guys on death row about how their taxpayer-funded, you know, attorneys help them and other things. I mean, there's lots of problems that exist out there. You're talking about making it, again, just more expensive and almost impossible for someone to own a gun who doesn't have means, doesn't have the education.
And they'll be in front of a Democratic judge if they live in an urban county.
And even if you have great legal counsel, what evidence do you bring that you're not going to do something? I mean, how do you even
prove you're not crazy, Rachel?
Prove I'm not going to do something tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, so I want to note there's a fantastic article up on TexasScorecard.com written by State Representative Tony Tinderholt, titled "On the Darkest Days, Our Principles Must Shine Brightest." I encourage you to check out that commentary. And in it, he writes, "Many politicians believe our role is to right all society's wrongs. While improving the lives of Texas is a good goal, conservatives understand the most fundamental job we have as elected officials." And he goes on to talk about is protecting liberty, protecting the right to my printer cut off. Sorry about that. But encourage you to take a look at Tony Tinderholt's article. And Tony Tinderholt is watching here today, and he notes criminals will get guns regardless of what the law says. Most shootings occur in gun-free zones and in cities with the strictest gun laws, and the most murders. So, I mean, Mr. Tinderholt makes a really good point that, you know, it is interesting how many of these shootings take places in places that have the 30-06 and 30-07 signs, take place in places where there are very specific laws existing saying you can't bring a gun here, and yet for some reason the criminals keep bringing guns here. How is another law going to stop it unless confiscation is the goal?
I've never seen any criminal say, hey, I have these heinous plans, I'm going to go shoot something up, and then say, oh, dang it, there's a sign there that says I can't take a gun. Or say, oh gosh, I was going to go do this today, but my permit hasn't come in yet to carry a gun. I'm going to have to wait till that comes in. Those laws to have a permit or laws that ban guns from places, they don't stop criminals. They only stop the law abiding.
So I want to move to Governor Greg Abbott. We've talked about Governor Abbott and some of his proposals just a little bit here. We have a question from Janie who asks, how dangerous are the executive orders that Abbott has already signed or that he's going to sign? So what do you guys make of this series of orders that the governor, now a lot of the media have described these as, oh, well, they're just encouraging interagency communication and that sort of thing. What is the trouble with Governor Abbott's orders, Mr. Rinaldi?
I mean, like we said, it is trying to predict who's going to commit a crime, and it's based on a definition of mental illness that's largely written by a profession that increasingly is defining it punitively based on your political views, designed to silence political speech. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think he's setting up a structure that can be used in a very dangerous way by people in the future.
It feels like now that you have when kids go and visit with the doctor, or when they talk to their school counselor, increasingly a question asked by the well-intentioned school counselor, the well-intentioned doctor is, how many guns are in your home? As if they're asking, how many dirty needles are lying around in your bedroom or something. I mean, it's so there does seem to be a preponderance of the counselors and those kind of the professional community, which take the view that owning a gun is a sign of mental illness. That it's not is there a gun owner with a mental illness needs to be addressed? No, if you own a gun, that's a symptom.
Yeah, and my wife's a licensed professional counselor, so we always get her trade publications and read them, and it's very scary. I mean, not only that, but you also have them defining, for example, if you don't believe in climate change, you're detached from reality. It can be a sign of psychosis. Mm-hmm. Things on that point of view. If you don't agree with the left, you're not perceiving reality correctly.
So one thing that we've been hearing nationally is the idea of fix NICS. There's a movement on that. You've seen Republicans, Democrats alike joining on to that into that movement. The fix NICS, the National Instant
Check System.
Criminal background check
system. So tell us now. So Governor Abbott's proposals seem to kind of slide into that kind of thinking of, let's just beef up what we already have. Is that fair? Rachel?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly what it is, and it kind of just, reiterates what I was saying earlier, that, I mean, our background check system is broken, and it's a de facto registry, and, putting more people into the database is only going to make things worse. It's not actually fixing anything. They're just funneling more names into an already broken system.
Bingo. Yeah, their idea of fixing it is let's add a whole bunch more names. Some of the last names that were added included 250,000 veterans who were added because they were unable or deemed unable to handle their financial affairs by themselves. Maybe their wife did it for them or with them. And because of that, they said, oh, you're mentally incompetent, we're going to ban you from purchasing a gun.
Wow. So, on the one hand, there's that, my pastor likes to joke that all good heresies have about 99% truth in them, right? There is some the Sutherland Springs. You had a guy who should not have been able to have a gun, right? But yet the Air Force failed to follow the law and to put his name into the system. So you see those kind of things like, well, yeah, we need to fix the system, but it seems like all the fixes that are being proposed aren't fixing flaws. They're actually, as you said, Rachel, they're just creating new classes of large groups of people to shove into the system.
2 points on Sutherland Springs. So let's say that he had been denied. Mm-hmm. Do you think he wouldn't have found some other way to carry out his crime? And we need to look at what stopped him. What stopped him is a citizen with an AR-15, Stephen Williford. And what could have stopped him sooner is if somebody, maybe in the church, had either an AR-15 in their truck or a handgun on their hip. And so maybe a solution we should be looking at, if you want to do something, let's stop stigmatizing and demonizing gun ownership and encourage citizens that, if you want to defend your lives, you are your line of defense. And you carrying a gun is actually a very effective way.
Yeah. And plus, let's look at what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent homicides, right? I mean, you don't care if you get killed by getting run over with a car or
Right.
by getting shot, I would think. But it's always this focus on gun crime. And what you have is about 300 to 300 plus, 300, 400 murders a year committed with rifles. And that's where everybody's focus is. More are committed with hands and feet than with rifles. We have to put that in perspective. We want to stop homicides, which means we want to stop bad behavior, and that's what we need to focus on. And more guns has actually reduced the homicide rate.
You know, the four of us are currently sitting at a table in Austin, Texas. A new report out, almost a month ago, that the Austin Police Department's response time is about 8.5 minutes. In situations in which, like the lady in Houston, where literal seconds are the question, 9 minutes is literally a lifetime. And yet, so many of the proposals out there is, if you're at church and a bad guy comes in, everyone needs to dial 911. Well, really? Okay, so in 9 minutes, how much damage can be done by a bad man looking to do bad things? So to your point, the idea that it's ultimately my family and my own protection rests with me. If something bad happens to us, I hope there's a very competent police investigator who catches that bad guy. But the police really aren't there. They use the phrase serve and protect a lot, but really it's supposed to be serve. Protection's up to me. The idea of police protection, unless there's going to be a police officer at in every house, in every business, which I'm not sure that we actually want.
And you have law enforcement there at Parkland who didn't go inside and help.
Yeah.
So,
And we saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
The purpose of law enforcement is to deter crime by prosecuting the instant crime after the fact and enforcing it. So you're not the person who they're designed to stop. It's future crimes through the deterrent effect.
Yeah. And again, there's all sorts of questions about how much deterrence actually happens. The corrupted mind.
Well, and they talk about gun crime and gun violence. I've been carrying a gun on my hip for 10 years. My gun hasn't committed a crime yet.
Well, and then one of the things that the
Never met a
media
violent gun.
one of the things that the media always overlooks is the millions of defensive uses of firearms every year. You are much more likely to need your firearm for defense than you are to be a victim of gun violence.
Well, I think Ross Kessig on our team noted, I think you're twice as likely to be struck by lightning than to be involved in a mass shooting. All these kind of instances, and then people will mock that as, it's apples and oranges. Yeah, but it does kind of make the point of, from the perspective that, we've got the media yelling and screaming about all these horrible instances.
Can we investigate lightning crime?
Maybe we should invite lightning crime. That's nature has evil intent or something. But we have started scaring ourselves silly with the idea, and there's a very pervasive effort on the left and by the media to heighten awareness of what are ultimately very isolated cases. To convince people to, in Matt Schaefer's words, statement of Matt Schaefer's words, to do something, and that something is deny us.
And when you look at it in the aggregate, the United States is about 5 murders per 100,000 people, which is higher than some other countries like Great Britain, which is like at 3, but not that much different when you're looking at the islands in the Caribbean. You're talking about murder rates of 35 per 100,000. But when you take out the places in the United States that have enacted strict gun control laws, we're actually right up there among the top countries and the safest countries in the world.
Take out Chicago, take out Washington,
Baltimore,
D.C., take out
New
Baltimore, Los Angeles. Suddenly we're much safer than anywhere in Europe in a lot of cases. So, all right, so I want to end us with the question that Matt Schaefer says we need to avoid, which is to do something. Okay, so Chris McNutt, if the goal, and a laudable goal, is to reduce gun violence, to reduce violence, period, what do we do? What would Emperor McNutt do if given the opportunity?
My do something would be giving the power back to the people, and by that would be passing constitutional carry legislation, making Texas the 16th constitutional carry state. And that simply states that if you're able to legally possess a firearm, you should be able to carry it to protect yourself and your loved ones without having to beg the government for permission or paying any expensive taxes or fees. And in fact, the 3 top safest states with the least amount of violent crime are constitutional carry states. That's Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And New Hampshire is a relative newcomer to that list. And guess what?
Right-wing states, by the way. These are far-right states.
Yeah, home of Bernie Sanders in Vermont has never required licensing for carrying a handgun. So Texas is far behind on this, and it's time for us to catch up.
Mr. Rinaldi, what would you do?
What would I do? I would encourage the lawful and private ownership of firearms. I would eliminate gun-free zones for a deterrent effect. I think that would help deter murders overall, but I think the real solution in this comes individually and from our society. I mean, I think our problem is cultural. We have a culture right now in this country like never before where our kids are growing up devoid of purpose, devoid of meaning in life. And we really need to reflect on why that is the case, whether it be our schools, whether it be our community institutions. We are producing young people now that are more hopeless than ever, and we need to fix that.
Rachel, I'm going to change the question for you. What should these people do as we're looking at these proposals, as we're looking at these issues? What should Texas voters do in regards to these issues?
Right, so Texas voters need to value life. And there are 2 sides of that. There's the public policy side, which if you value life, you need to make sure that your legislators know your priorities and you're watching them, what they do, and that you will not tolerate any steps that disvalue life, including gun control. And that you are going to push them to do exactly what these gentlemen said, which is pass constitutional carry, get rid of that stupid license requirement, and get rid of government-mandated gun-free zones. And secondly, if you want to value life on the public policy side, take whatever steps are necessary to be able to protect your own life. We do things every day like look both directions before we cross the street and wear a seatbelt and have a fire extinguisher and drink water and eat food. You know, think about carrying a gun too and get that training that you need to. So it's public policy, but it's also public awareness and the things you can do in your everyday life to be able to protect yourself and your family because life is precious.
Rachel Malone, Gun Owners of America, gunowners.org. Appreciate your time. Matt Rinaldi, Matt Rinaldi TX on social media. Appreciate you being with us. And of course, the always courageous Chris McNutt of National Association of Gun Rights and Texas Gun Rights. Thank you for being with us, even with your scary lapel pin.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And folks, please make sure you check out their website, social media accounts, follow them, get informed and engaged. The best way that we can protect our constitutional rights is to use them loudly. Have a great day.